Hi, I'm Eric Voss, and there's a new trailer for Game of Thrones Season 7, which is crazy because I feel like I'm still recovering from the first trailer a few weeks ago. Come on, give me some air, HBO. I'm just kidding. Smother me, HBO. Smother me with Game of Thrones footage. This second trailer has even more interesting shots and details that you might have missed, little clues that could predict what's going down in Season 7. So, spoiler warning if you don't want to get into any of that stuff. Seriously, some of our predictions have been weirdly right in the past, and if we are, some of these could end up being pretty huge spoilers. So you've been warned. Anyway, let's get started.
Don't fight in the north or the south. Fight every battle, everywhere. Always. In your mind.
So this trailer opens with the amazing music called Light of the Seven, which is the same music that we heard open the Season 6 finale, The Winds of Winter. Now, this music was composed by Ramin Djawadi, but the director of that episode, Miguel Sapochnik, actually consulted on the dramatic shifts of this music. So the music alone tells a story, carefully leading each character closer and closer to their deaths. And just like it did in that episode, this music does the same thing in this trailer, with Sansa now filling in for Cersei as the badass queen turning back towards the camera as every other character confronts death. And if you're interested in this stuff, The Light of the Seven has even more secret narrative elements that we broke down in our season finale video last summer. Also, Djawadi's music is just always super layered and interesting from a narrative standpoint, and he used a lot of these similar techniques in the last trailer, and you should definitely check out our breakdown for that too. Now, what is Sansa doing here? It looks like she's in the Godswood in Winterfell, walking away from the Heart Tree, and if you look closely, there's a figure standing behind her. Actually, this could be a reverse shot of the scene that we saw in The Winds of Winter when she walked away from Littlefinger. And that might be why we hear Baelish's voice here, giving Sansa advice. He's saying not to focus on one geographic region of the war, but to look at the big picture like a chessboard, thinking 12 moves ahead. In fact, this game board motif with various compass directions is another parallel to how the first trailer began.
Enemies to the east, enemies to the west, enemies to the south, enemies to the north.
Now this trailer as an entire piece opens and closes with Sansa, who we don't really see anywhere else in the trailer, and I think there's a really important reason for that, but I'll save it for the end of the video. In the meantime, there's just so much more to talk about, so let's move on. Okay, so in this section, we see the northern gate of Castle Black open, which is from the last trailer, but now we see who it's opening for. Looking at this closely, that's Mira dragging Bran on the sled. So this is confirmation that Bran will finally return south of the Wall, probably to Winterfell too, as we see later in this trailer. But remember, the mark that the Night King left on Bran's arm allowed the White Walkers to break through the protective magical barrier around the Great Weirwood Tree way up north, and that might also apply to the magical barrier that's supposed to be in the wall to keep White Walkers out. So, do you think Bran crossing under the wall is something that could doom the wall? Let me know in the comments. But then moving on, we see Jon in wildling furs somewhere north of the wall probably, and then we get this shot in King's Landing. Notice the castle towers in the background as Crimson Lannister banners hang down. So clearly Cersei has redecorated the city from Baratheon insignia to Lannister lions, like she did in the throne room in the last trailer, replacing the 7-pointed star with a lion. But notice here how the citizens of King's Landing are clapping. And take a look at these soldiers. So who are these guys? They aren't wearing white King's Guard capes or red Lannister armor, so it's hard to tell, but I think these guys might be Euron Greyjoy's soldiers. They don't look exactly like they did in the Kingsmoot last season, but their armor and helmets are similar colors to the sails on the Greyjoy boats. So why would Euron's men be celebrated in King's Landing? Well, in my last trailer breakdown, I looked closely at that shot in the throne room with Cersei talking to someone who kind of grossed her out, and I suggested that that could be Euron Greyjoy, offering to use his fleet to protect King's Landing, probably in exchange for something that Cersei wouldn't want to give. But my theory is that because Cersei is out of allies, she would be forced to make this kind of alliance. Now, we get further confirmation of that prediction later in the trailer, but here I think this is Euron's men returning to King's Landing, with the people of the city thanking them for protecting it from sea. But let me know in the comments who you think these soldiers are, and if you think there's anything to this theory of an alliance between Euron and Cersei. And before I move on, on, there is this shot of Daenerys at Dragonstone running her hand along the Westeros map table created by her ancestor Aegon the Conqueror. So as I pointed out in the last trailer breakdown, this could be Daenerys showing that she's poised to repeat that conquest. And notice how most of the pieces are already knocked over, except this one, which looks like it could be the same Lannister lion piece that we saw get knocked over in the last trailer. And I think Daenerys pausing here is her reaching out to do that. Maybe to signal her desire to take Cersei off the Iron Throne, or her desire to attack the Lannisters' home at Casterly Rock in Lannisport. More on that later, but let's move on.
For centuries, our families fought together against their common enemy, despite their differences, together.
Okay, starting off this section, there's this shot of the beaches of Dragonstone, and it's hard to tell, but the tiny figures arriving by boat look like they could be Jon and Ser Davos and their crew. And if you look even further behind them, you can barely make out a 3-person greeting party, which could be Tyrion, Varys, maybe Grey Worm, maybe Daenerys herself. And if so, this could be part of Jon and Ser Davos's diplomatic mission to Dragonstone to try to get Daenerys to join them in their fight against the White Walkers. Next, this shot of Arya on horseback. And based on her facial expression here, it looks like she could be coming up the hill to see her home of Winterfell. Like the camera is gonna pan around to show the Winterfell towers as she finally makes this dramatic homecoming. Then after this shot of Jaime and King's Landing and a shot of Littlefinger and a blade sharpening from the last trailer, there's this interesting image of Daenerys walking along the Dragonstone beach. Now this could be Daenerys walking out to greet Jon or shortly after she arrives home, but check out the shape in the red colored rock formation behind her. This kind of looks like the head of Drogon. And it would be super awesome if this shot is Daenerys meeting Jon, and then the camera pans over and we see Jon is standing in front of a rock formation that's in the shape of a wolf head. Or hell, maybe in the shape of another dragon, now that we know that Jon is half Targaryen. Now, there are actually a lot of interesting consequences of Jon's Targaryen bloodline that the show might explore, and I go into all of them, including his claim to the Iron Throne and what his real name is, and another video I made about the unresolved mysteries left to do on Game of Thrones. So go check that out. Now, over this, notice the speech that Jon gives.
For centuries, our families fought together against their common enemy.
Now, the editing makes it seem like he's talking to Daenerys here, like this is part of his pitch to join his mission. But when you stop to think about it, the last fight that Jon is talking about is the war that the northern families joined forces together against Daenerys' Targaryen family. So this audio is probably Jon talking to the other northern lords. It's just ironic that we see one of the losers of that war, Daenerys, as Jon is alluding to it. Now, this banner that Daenerys tears down is a stag emblazoned with a flaming heart. And remember, that's a sigil of Stannis Baratheon, who took Dragonstone from the Targaryens and then later abandoned it when he sailed north to join Jon at the Wall. And I think this shot with the banner is meant to parallel Jon's homecoming in Winterfell after the Battle of the Bastards, when they finally tore down the banners of the strangers who took over their ancestral home and replaced them with the natural Stark banners. So I think Daenerys is doing the same here, reclaiming her ancestral home from the people who took it from her. And before I move on, we see this amazing wide shot of Daenerys' 3 dragons flying toward Dragonstone while Tyrion stands on the cliff looking a little nervous. I actually have a prediction about what's going on here, but I'll get to it later. For now, let's move on.
We need to do the same if we're gonna survive. Because the enemy is real.
Okay, after this quick shot of Theon as he stands on what looks like a ship on fire, more on that in a second, we get this interesting shot of Grey Worm on a different boat headed into this cave. Now, I think this cave could be a secret back entrance to Casterly Rock. And here's why I think this. Tyrion told Varys that his father, Tywin, put him in charge of the sewer system of Casterly Rock.
My father put me in charge of all the drains and cisterns in Casterly Rock. The water never flowed better, and all the shit found its way to the sea.
Now that means that Tyrion probably knows all the drainage routes underneath the city, and I think that he's gonna share this knowledge with Grey Worm and the Unsullied so that they can sneak a small task force into the city and sack it from the inside out. Actually, remember, Grey Worm took down the city of Yunkai in a similar mission in Season 3. Next, there's a shot of Brienne and Podrick returning to Winterfell, and a very quick shot of the Hound found Sandor Clegane somewhere probably way up north. Now remember, he joined up with the Brotherhood last season, so it's looking like he and the Brotherhood will be the ones joining Jon in this mission north of the Wall that we've seen clips of in these trailers. We also see more shots of this big battle, which I'm assuming is all from the same battle of Daenerys' forces against the Lannisters. First, there's this shot of an unsullied soldier going down in a barrage of arrows, fired by these Lannister archers, and notice how Jaime and Bronn are the ones commanding them. So that means Jaime will be part of this battle, the same battle, remember, that will feature a massive dragon, and I just can't wait to see the look on Jaime's face when that thing shows up. There's also a quick shot of the moment that the Dothraki cavalry collides with the Lannister shields, and yeah, I assume some CGI went into this shot because they're not gonna like ram real horses into real people in shields. So when you think about that, I love the detail of the splinters exploding. There's also a quick angle of this ship on fire with someone jumping onto the deck, and yeah, again, I think this is part of that naval battle between Yara and Theon's forces and Euron's fleet. Next, there's this shot of a flock of crows flying over what looks like a massive army of whites and White Walkers. And check out this crow's eye. He's clearly being warged into by Bran here, so maybe this is the Three-Eyed Raven's promise coming true, and Bran is finally flying here.
You'll never walk again, but you will fly.
Now, it's interesting that the Night King seems to look up at Bran here, like he's able to see through the warg and spot Bran. And of course, that's what scares Bran out of the vision. Now, this could be the mark that the Night King left on Bran, making him visible to the Night King again. And before I move on, Bran wakes up sitting in this wheelchair, which looks very similar to the one that Prince Doran Martell had. This actually kind of feels like Bran is Professor X coming out of Cerebro. But in this case, Cerebro is the heart tree of the Winterfell Godswood. That's right, Bran is finally home. And who is he talking to here? Now, at first I thought this was Sir Davos, who's maybe like asking Bran for information on how far south the White Walkers are. And by the way, there's actually a super interesting theory about where the White Walkers are headed and what they want. And I go into all those details in our other Game of Thrones Unresolved Mysteries video, so definitely check that out. But I'm wondering if this guy isn't Sir Davos, but it's another character. Now, currently on the show, Bran is the only character who definitely knows that Jon's true parents are Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, except one other person, Howland Reed. Now, Howland Reed is Mira's father, and he was there with Ned Stark at the Tower of Joy. So maybe when Bran returns to Winterfell with Mira, Howland will arrive and confirm to Bran what exactly it was that he saw. So do you think Howland Reed will appear on Game of Thrones? Let me know what you think in the comments, but let's move on.
It's always been real.
Okay, this next section starts with the craziest shot in this trailer. The Lightning Lord of the Brotherhood without banners holding a flaming sword. Now, we've seen him with a sword on fire before, remember back in season 3 when he dueled with the Hound. But this one looks like it lights up on its own. Now, this is huge. Obviously, it connects BERIC to the prophecy of AZOR AHAI Reborn. Now, remember that figure is supposed to carry a flaming sword and vanquish the others, or the White Walkers. Now, I'm not 100% that this shot is confirmation that BERIC is AZOR AHAI, but we do know that he is a champion of the Lord of Light. Remember, Thoros of Myr did resurrect him from the dead the same way that Melisandre did for Jon Snow. So I do predict that BERIC thinks he's AZOR AHAI Reborn, and that will be the purpose of this small mission with Jon and Tormund and the Brotherhood north of the Wall. I think they're on their way to the White Walkers because they hope that BERIC will defeat them as AZOR AHAI is prophesied to. But because this is a world created by George R.R. Martin, and I don't think he really cares about prophecies that much, I really don't think things will go down this neatly. But what do you think about this? Do you think this flaming sword makes Beric Dondarrion the top candidate to be AZOR AHAI Reborn and the prince that was promised? Let me know in the comments. Up next, we see these shots of Euron Greyjoy's fleet making its way to King's Landing. The sails have the Greyjoy Kraken sigil, and the side sails are the same design that Euron's ships have in the books. Now, I think this is either part of Euron's initial peaceful arrival to King's Landing to form his alliance with Cersei, or his post-victory homecoming, but more on that later. We also see more shots of the Unsullied as they sack the city, and we see one group of them opening the doors from the inside, allowing more of them to pour in from the outside. So here's what I think is going down here. I think this will be a part of a two-pronged attack, a smaller task force sneaking into Casterly Rock from the drains under the city, while more are invading from the outside. Actually, I think that since we saw that one Unsullied soldier earlier on getting hit by arrows fired from Lannister arrows from behind their front lines, I think it's possible that this whole battle could be taking place outside the city of Casterly Rock, with Jaime and Bronn and the Lannisters defending their home city. Now, I could be wrong about this, like this battle could just be taking place somewhere else or in a totally different part of the season. But the section does show us more parts of this battlefield, wherever it is. Jaime emotionally charging on horseback through the flames, and another angle of the closing shot from the last trailer with the dragon flying overhead the Dothraki Blood Riders. And from this angle, you can definitely make out that someone is riding on the back of that dragon. Now, my first guess is obviously Daenerys, but it's kind of hard to tell which dragon this is. Now, I initially assumed it was Drogon, the largest with black and red scales, but it also kind of looks like Rhaegal. That dragon has greenish and red scales. In which case, maybe this isn't Daenerys on the back of this dragon, maybe it's someone else. For example, Tyrion. In fact, that could be what's going on in that earlier shot with Tyrion looking uncomfortable at Dragonstone. Like perhaps Daenerys is ordering him to ride the dragon into battle because remember, Tyrion was able to get along pretty well with Rhaegal back in Meereen when he unchained him. And I know it seems like I'm kind of grasping here, but if this is all true, this would be a super emotional battle for Tyrion, leading a deadly charge on his home city, feeling like a traitor to his Lannister men, specifically his brother Jaime, the only Lannister he still probably loves. This would be an epic battle of brother against brother. And if this is Tyrion riding Rhaegal, that could just mean Daenerys divided her forces, and that's actually a tactic used by her ancestor Aegon the Conqueror. Very rarely did he use all three dragons in one battle. Like usually he would send his sisters on the other dragons to other places, because you really don't need more than one dragon in a battle. So maybe Daenerys has taken her other two dragons somewhere else. Now, of course, there's also the lingering mystery over Tyrion's possible connection with the dragons and the Targaryens, and I discussed that in our other Game of Thrones Unresolved Mystery video, so go check it out. But for this video, let me know in the comments, do you think that we'll see Tyrion ever ride a dragon? And do you want Tyrion to have to face his brother Jaime in battle? Let me know. Let's move on. Okay, this section opens with Yara and Theon nervously looking up at an explosion on their ships. So yeah, things are looking pretty bad for them in this naval battle with their uncle Euron. And I have a feeling that the way this will go down is that maybe Yara and Theon won't die here. But these trailers have been showing us a lot of Yara and Theon in this very dismal situation. So honestly, I'd be a little surprised if this is actually the place they're gonna die. Rather, I think this could go one of two other ways. Like maybe they managed to escape, like they might be the two figures that we saw plunge into the water last trailer, or they could be taken as hostages by Euron back to King's Landing. I actually think that part of the reason all those people in King's Landing were clapping is that the Greyjoys brought some hostages back with them. But if it's not Theon and Yara, it could be someone else who's with them in their fleet. And since we know that there were a lot of people who were teaming up in Daenerys' fleet, including the Tyrells and the Martells, I think it's more likely that those hostages will be Ellaria Sand and or the Sand Snakes. Remember, they were the ones who killed Cersei's daughter Myrcella. So maybe that's part of the alliance that Cersei makes with Euron. Like she wants him to bring her back the women who killed her daughter. And maybe she wants to let the Mountain do a repeat of what Ellaria saw him do to her boyfriend Oberyn. Now, these next shots show the Lannister troops getting into formation, and they're using the same spear through the shield tactic that we saw the Boltons use in last season's Battle of the Bastards. Actually, in our breakdown of that episode, we explore how that battle formation was inspired by battles in real Roman history. So definitely watch that video to see how Game of Thrones uses these interesting real-world battle history tactics to inspire their battle scenes. But next is this interesting shot of Jon Snow and his men stranded on this rock surrounded by whites. This kind of looks like another nightmare Hardhome situation. And this location looks a lot like the Fist of the First Men that we've seen earlier in the series. If you look closely at the background, these whites are covering the mountainsides like ants. Also, if you look closely over on the right, I think we can make out the Night King sitting on his horse, flanked by a few other White Walkers who are watching all this go down. Now, fighting alongside Jon is BERIC with his flaming sword. Now, some people are saying that looks more like the Hound, but notice how this guy is wearing the same high collar and furs that BERIC wore in that earlier shot. I also assume that Tormund and the Hound will also appear in this battle. Now, big question here, how are Jon and his guys supposed to get out of this impossible situation? Now, unless we're seeing Jon's death here, to me, the only way to get out of this is some air support from above. Specifically, maybe Daenerys and her dragons. Or maybe one of the dragons without Dany, like Viserion, the cream and gold colored one, who I don't think we've seen alone anywhere. I'm predicting that they might swoop in and torch some of these whites, who remember fire is the only thing that can kill them. Or maybe carry Jon to safety like those great eagles in The Lord of the Rings. And there's a quick shot of Missandei and Grey Worm, and then this interesting shot of someone who looks like the Hound, but look closely at the shot. He's not wearing any pants, or just really short shorts. And this location looks sunnier and warmer. I don't think the Hound is in any location like that. So this could be another one of Bran's visions into the past, perhaps showing the day that Sandor's face was cruelly burned. Next is a shot of Jon and Davos at Dragonstone. That rock wall behind them is the same one from the beach before. This could be their reaction shot as Daenerys is coming up to greet them. Now there's a quick shot of Jon swinging his Valyrian steel sword, Longclaw, at a White Walker, Dothraki riders galloping through flames, and then this interesting shot of a beach. Now, who is this character collapsing weakly into the water? Now, it's kind of hard to tell, but to me, this guy kind of looks like Gendry. Yeah, I know, it's great. Gendry is rumored to come back this season, and maybe he's just exhausted from rowing a boat for 3 seasons. I don't know, let me know who you think this is in the comments. Then, after a shot of Euron swinging at someone in this naval battle, there's this freaky shot of Drogon in a close-up of his teeth. And I'm pretty sure that's Daenerys riding on his back, and that's Dragonstone in the background. So this could be the point of view of Tyrion, and this is the moment that, if my theory is right, he and Daenerys split up on the backs of different dragons. Okay, let's move on to this final section.
When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives.
Okay, so this final section is super mysterious. First, we see this overhead shot that we saw in the last trailer. Now, I pointed out then that this character is carrying a warhammer, which, remember, was the weapon of choice of Robert Baratheon. And that could mean that this character is Robert's son, who is an armory expert, Gendry. And this might be proof that he'll join up with the Brotherhood in this mission with Jon and Tormund. We also see a shot of a lone rider who looks like he's wounded. Now, this could be Jon escaping from this battle with the White Walkers. But then, most interestingly, there's this shot of Jon from behind as he faces off with the whites. Now, those flames in the background are interesting. Now, I would say they're from BERIC's sword, but everything is so freaking cold up in this location, I don't know if his sword could have caused those flames to get that high. So yeah, I'm thinking that this is dragonfire from a dragon that maybe picks them up and saves them. And that dragonfire could be why the whites are hanging back here. But let's talk about Sansa's interesting voiceover here.
The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives.
Now, a lot of you were asking about this line about the lone wolf in the pack, and it's actually a direct quote from her father, Ned Stark, who said this same line to Arya in the first book, A Game of Thrones. This was when he was trying to get her to stop fighting with her sister Sansa, basically trying to get her to learn that Starks need to stick together for when the darkness comes. And this quote is something that comes back to Arya throughout the books, actually. She remembers it when she thinks Bran and Rickon died, when she's at Harrenhal, and she remembers it at the beginning of book 4, believing now that Ned had it backwards and that her pack of Starks had all died off, leaving her as the surviving lone wolf. Now, when Sansa says this line, we don't see where she is or who she's talking to, so maybe this is the line that she tells Arya when they reunite, to call back the time when they saw each other when they were girls with this stupid animosity, and now they've both grown older and matured and they understand how much they need each other. But at the same time, notice Sansa's dark tone as she says these words.
When the snows fall and the white winds blow.
Now, the last time we heard Sansa talk like this, it was last season at the end of the Battle of the Bastards, when she sentenced Ramsay Bolton to die.
Your words will disappear.
So if this is a similar kind of threat, who is the lone wolf that Sansa's referring to? Now, I think this connects back to the opening of this trailer, when Littlefinger gave Sansa that advice.
Fight every battle, everywhere. Always. In your mind.
And looking back, those words now kind of sound like final words before someone dies. So yeah, I think Sansa could be talking to Littlefinger here. In a lot of ways, he's a lone wolf. He's a solo operator. He doesn't really rely on family or companions to get stuff done. Also, he's been trying to get Sansa to turn against Jon, against her own blood, to divide up the Stark pack. And now it looks like the surviving Stark kids are all reuniting in Winterfell, and the pack has survived. So I predict that Sansa is doing of like a Sam Jackson Bible verse in Pulp Fiction, coldly invoking her father to avenge the man who betrayed him, who is now trying to turn his children against each other, finally putting an end to that game. But who do you think Sansa is talking to here? Who do you think is the lone wolf that will die? Let me know your thoughts on this question and all the other questions that I brought up throughout this video. Comment down below. And share this video to keep the discussion going. On Twitter, you can tweet directly at me, at EAVoss, or New Rockstars at New Rockstars. And subscribe to this channel to keep up with all the Game of Thrones videos that we're gonna be putting out. You heard me, we're putting out here at New Rockstars. You can also buy our love and really just be a more active part of this channel by contributing to New Rockstars on Patreon. Big thanks to all of our current patrons, especially Kenny Smith. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.